Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special episode of Uncanny Treks. We are covering the two issues of DC versus AEW. They call it DC X AEW. I don't know what's up with these X's. To me, it's always going to be DC versus AEW. I'm Bob in Cascadia. That's Matt in the Southland. Matt, how you doing this evening?
Doing all right, Bob. I was really excited about this crossover because they've done these in the past before where they have superheroes team up with wrestlers.
Definitely have been wrestling comics, but have there been wrestlers teaming?
There were WCW issues with DC, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I know there have been WCW and WWE comics, but I don't know if they've ever actually crossed over with superhero characters.
You never seen Superman body slam Sting.
I've seen Superman box Muhammad Ali. That's a great comic.
That
I
is a
don't think
good
I've ever
comic.
seen Superman body slam Sting.
But you have seen wrestling comics, though.
I have seen wrestling comics, and they're for the most part pretty bad. Although there was a WWE set of comics about 10 years ago that people were pretty fond of.
It's only when they take them out of the ring and start doing weird things with them does it become fun.
There's a famous one from, I think, the 90s that's Kevin Nash wandering around a post-apocalyptic wasteland.
The wrestlers had their own comic books at times. Kevin Nash was one of them. Ultimate Warrior had one where he beats up Santa Claus.
Nice. Maybe we should do further episodes on wrestling comics.
There's a whole run of early 90s WCW comics that are like really bad.
Oh, nice.
But,
I want to look at those now. It
yeah.
sounds awful. Matt, I do want to make a point before we get started on this. And another podcast I listened to also made this point. Obviously, Warner Brothers has a small ownership stake in AEW, but it seems they may not have had the likeness rights for all of the AEW wrestlers in this because especially Tony Storm and Kenny Omega do not look very much at all like what Tony Storm and Kenny Omega look like.
I did wonder that, Bob, but especially with Kenny Omega, because I had no clue who that was supposed to be.
You do have to give the writer Steve Orlando credit because he really captures the character voices of Mercedes Moné and Tony Storm in particular well.
The thing, too, with this, of all the wrestlers who I think would be so on board and excited about this, Kenny Omega would be one of them. So his likeness should have been pretty spot on.
That's funny. Have you read anything else by Steve Orlando?
Not to my knowledge.
He wrote a really good Midnighter series that we might cover at some point, but probably the next thing we would do is he has a Supergirl series. It's not amazing, but I like it pretty well. We might do that before the Supergirl comes out.
Didn't he write a Scarlet Witch book?
He did.
I read some of that.
I wasn't feeling it. I thought the narration was pretty bad. I think it was in second person. I wanted to like it because I like Orlando and I like Wanda, but I wasn't feeling it.
I read the first couple of issues of that when it dropped.
I think I remember you texted me about that now that you say that. He also did a one-shot with Thunderbird that he co-wrote with wrestler Nyla Rose. That was pretty good. And then Travis Mercer is the artist on this. I don't think I've seen a Travis Mercer comic, but it looks like he's done a lot of Star Trek comics, which is interesting that he gets called on to do wrestling Star Trek. That's an interesting portfolio for a comics artist. So the title of these issues, Matt, is the Forbidden Door Saga. That made me laugh. That's a pretty clever title. I also think it's hilarious. These two issues have the exact structure of, if our listeners have ever read a 1940s JSA comic or a 1960s JLA and JSA comic where they team up, and what always happens is you have some challenge, then the team has to split up in pairs, then you have a 2 to 4 page story about the pair. Because of that, we're going to talk about issue 1, but I divided it up into the individual pairs, and we're going to talk about a little bit from issue 1 and a little bit from issue 2 with some of those pairs, since that just more naturally flows that way rather than to go through the whole roster again. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
All right. So another interesting thing is this comic starts off by teasing that AEW's been doing a Forbidden Door special with an alien wrestling league, which was pretty funny. There's a tease that there's a whole roster of alien wrestlers that we might get to see, but we don't actually get to see them because Booster Gold, who's the color commentator for Excalibur on these issues, is assuring us that the Intergalactic Wrestling League has already left. So if they do a sequel, Matt, maybe we'll get to meet this Intergalactic Wrestling League.
I'm looking at the first page of the book, and I've already found one little like Easter egg, and it cracks me up with the art. They've got a fan in the audience who's holding up a sign that says, "Simon, give this an up." That's a reference to the guy at What Culture who gives ups. Wow, that's a deep cut there.
I don't know what the timing of when this was written and drawn was, We start with Mercedes Moné has just cheated to win an intergalactic title. That's fun. It makes total sense that Mercedes Moné, Ultimo Moné would be doing that. But this also came out towards the tail end of Ultimo Moné doing her 14 belts, 15 belts
Right.
Moné
She has
thing.
she's just another belt for her.
Just another belt, which was pretty great. And then it's also pretty funny that she's imperiously commanding Hawk Girl to go fetch her belt. I've enjoyed that. So we get our first pair off, Matt, and it's a Nightwing and the aerial assassin Will Ospreay versus the League of Assassins.
I liked the actual look of the League of Assassins here. That was cool. They're all in complete black. Will Osprey, they hit him pretty good. He looks good. He looks like he's
Yeah,
supposed to.
it's funny that the dynamic in this issue and the next issue is that Osprey's too brutal and it's making Nightwing uncomfortable.
You've got Nightwing doing his thing, and you've got Osprey setting him up for whatever Osprey's move is called. It's a package pile driver looking thing.
Yeah, Osprey's been injured for most of the time I've been watching AEW, so I haven't seen that much from him.
To see this team up to start off, Bob, I was okay. I see what this is doing. I'm good with this, but I was glad, like you said earlier, then they moved to a different set though, a different team.
The second one is the one that I saw a lot of notice of on the internet. Guy Gardner and John Moxley team up to fight the mutants from Dark Knight Returns. And it's also funny, this nice little Easter egg that they're doing this in Vanity City, which I don't know if you have heard of Vanity City, but it's DCU's version of Portland.
Oh,
And Grant Morrison and Mark Miller's Aztec, that's where he's headquartered from the 90s.
John Moxley just going to town against one of the mutants from the famous Dark Knight.
Basically, John Moxley becomes the new leader of the mutants. Guy Gardner is a little put off by this. You also get the sense that Guy Gardner has never heard anybody say motherfucker before John says it, which was an interesting thing. Then our next pairing is Hangman Page and Hawk Girl, and they're fighting Clarion the Witch Boy in his hometown of Limbo Town.
You know how much I hate Clarion the Witch Boy, Bob.
You hate Clarion the Witch Boy. I'm not a big Hangman fan.
I'm not either.
It is funny how much Hangman is impressed by zombie Puritans. That comes across in an interesting way.
That seems right up his alley. Yeah.
Zombies. I do like that Clarion does call Hangman a nervous ranch hand, and he calls Hawk Girl an avian fetishist.
As we move forward, we have one of the more interesting team ups here.
Jon Stewart and Swerve Strickland, they're both African Americans. They're both in the military. They're on Dinosaur Island, and they're fighting a guy who's a wizard from the Barbarian comic Warlord. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but that's the guy they're fighting. He's a wizard.
I'm digging Jon Stewart's outfit here, Bob. Solid black. Is this his new design or something? It's solid black with the green V-shaped shield thing like Nightwing has, and then the really high boots.
Honest, I can't say I love it, man. I appreciate them trying to do something creative, but it doesn't. In a weird way, it's almost a color swap of the outfit that the wizard has as the wizard stands on top of the T-Rex. But Swerve is looking great, man. I like Swerve's leather jacket. I like that Swerve is riding a pterodactyl. That's a good look for Swerve. It's pretty fun.
I like the constructs that the Green Lanterns are giving the AEW wrestlers. In this case, Swerve is getting this giant AK-47 looking gun to use. Earlier, Guy Gardner wrapped barbed wire around Moxley's hands as a construct.
It's interesting because on that page with the gun, at first Swerve has his own gun on that page on 14 and 15, and then at the bottom of 15, I guess Swerve loses his gun and Jon Stewart creates him a Green Lantern gun. The next pairing we have, and this one was a good pairing to me, so a friend and I joke about Jim Cornette calling Orange Cassidy a comedy act. It makes perfect sense to me to have the two comedy acts paired together. So you get Orange Cassidy and Harley Quinn, and they're teaming up against the Royal Flush Gang in Atlantic City.
I don't care much for Orange Cassidy, but he is a comedy act, isn't he? He really is.
He is, although they're eternally trying to be, Orange Cassidy is taking this one serious.
This one's different. This one he's really putting effort in.
And it's funny, I don't think you're following current AEW that much, but there's another reflection of a current AEW storyline in this, which I don't know if Orlando knew or he happened to anticipate, but they're doing a current plot line, or at least they maybe just given up on a current plot line, where Orange Cassidy and Timeless Tony Storm were having a bit of a romance. And it's the exact same dynamic as Harley at first being frustrated by Orange Cassidy. She's angrily telling Orange Cassidy that she has a PhD, he ought to listen to her. But by the second issue, Harley is calling Orange Cassidy Sexy Citrus.
Yeah.
And so it's a funny anticipation of the Orange Cassidy, Timeless Tony romance.
My favorite pairing is next.
This is awesome, man. The next one is Zatanna, Zatara, and Tony Storm are fighting Justice Society villain Johnny Sorrow on Staten Island. This just works. Zatanna is whatever, but man, Steve Orlando gets how to write Timeless Tony. There's an amazing moment where Tony is yelling at Johnny Sorrow, calling me a degenerate fool. Get it
Yeah.
right, Johnny. I'm a degenerate legend. Speaking of romance, Matt, I don't think I've ever read a comic where there's heavy subtext that Zatanna is bisexual, but Tony is really into Zatanna. That really comes across.
Oh, it's all
the,
over this. I had to stop for a minute, especially in the second issue. I was, whoa.
It's really prominent in the second issue, and I like the idea of Timeless Tony seducing Zatanna. That's amazing.
Bob, how do you feel about
Yeah.
Willow Nightingale and Wonder Woman?
It's funny to see Wonder Woman and Willow Nightingale go all sword and sorcery in the underworld. This is also a funny thing of just last week when I was watching Bryan Danielson on commentary compared Willow to Absolute Wonder Woman, which I thought that was charming that Bryan reads comics to say Absolute Wonder Woman specifically. Then our next team up is we have Batman and Darby Allin pursuing Joker in the Gotham tomb. And we, of course, have Joker calling Darby Allin Goth Robin. That's a nice touch. We also have in issue 1, Darby subtly implying that Batman is no Sting while not expressly saying Sting, which sets up the surprise reveal of in issue 2, Stinger shows up and lambs Joker with his baseball bat.
The Darby Allin Batman team up was the one that I was, okay, that's going to be the most interesting in my opinion. And it does. It pays off by issue 2.
I didn't love it, but Steve Orlando correctly gets that Batman would dislike Darby. A podcast I listened to made this point already, but it's hilarious that the next segment is Bane versus Kenny Omega in Intergang headquarters in Metropolis. And whereas everybody else gets a team up, Kenny Omega doesn't even need a team up. He's beating up Bane by himself.
Yeah, Omega will just do it himself. I appreciate them going with the old school look for Bane.
That's important. You need your luchador Bane. You don't need your new version of Bane.
Especially in a wrestling crossover.
Indeed. Then the final team up we have is Aquaman and the CEO Ultimo Monet. They're fighting in the trench against the zombies, and Aquaman is absolutely a totally bland face. And so it makes perfect sense. He's the perfect type of face that you would have someone like Ultimo Monet turn on and betray, leave laying on the ground, which sets up Ultimo Monet's new alliance with Lex Luthor.
That's how we end the first issue, folks.
So 2 things before we get to the second issue, Matt. One is you already talked about this with Swerve, but did you notice that throughout this comic we see Hawkgirl, Hangman, Swerve, and Ultimo Monet are all using guns?
It's not uncommon. They got to use some guns.
It's a funny thing because wrestlers famously don't have guns unless they're Brian Pillman doing a controversial angle with Steve Austin. Then most superheroes have a moral objection to guns. It makes perfect sense when you're doing the wrestler superhero crossover to bring guns in, but it was funny and surprising.
It is weird always seeing a wrestler with a gun because why are you not using the gun when you have these no DQ matches?
Lose the Texas Death if you show up with a handgun.
Yes.
Another thing I did want to reference was there was a funny little teaser at the bottom of the last page of issue 1 where it says next, the Justice League Elite, a reference to how AEW has the faction, the Elite, and they always be elite in everything. But there really was an early aughts comic called the Justice League Elite. So that's not just something that they coined just for this. That was a pre-existing thing in the DC, which was funny.
I'm surprised the twins didn't show up. The Elite.
You mean the Bucks?
The Bucks. Yeah, we're the Bucks in this.
On the other hand, Hangman and Kenny are here, so the Elite is represented already. I think you would see this in the old comics too, that you always want to prioritize the wrestlers for these things that have the most cartoonish personalities. You would want Willow and Swerve and Timeless Tony and Darby and Orange Cassidy's. They're all cartoons.
They're more visually appealing.
I like the Bucks. The Bucks are funny heels, but I don't know. There's a way in which are they cartoonish enough to work tonally in this? With number 2, we start with the tag team of Lex Luthor and Ultimo Monet, and we get 2 different potential names. We've got the CEOs or the new CEOs, and we've got Injustice Inc. Which do you prefer for the Lex Luthor Ultimo Monet tag team?
I go with the CEOs. Injustice Inc. sounds like the video game, which was a fighting game for DC, but it's too on the nose.
I see what you're saying. Something else in 2 I noticed, which maybe this was obvious in 1, but I didn't pick up on in 1, and You have Martian Manhunter and Mr. Terrific basically doing the Batgirl Oracle thing of coordinating from the Watchtower. But I didn't realize until early in this issue that, basically Martian Manhunter and Mr. Terrific are serving as the announcer, which was clever because you do often see Martian Manhunter and Mr. Terrific in that coordinator role, and thinking about how similar that coordinator role in a superhero comic is to an announcer in a wrestling show, that was amusing.
Or in the gorilla position.
Like lead announcer and color commentator.
But I'm also thinking of the gorilla position as well, being the ones that are telling people what to do.
Like a match producer?
Yeah, gorilla position it's where Tony and them sit and tell people that's where they produce the matches.
Oh, I didn't know that term.
It's after Gorilla Monsoon, Bob. It's where he used to sit.
Oh, I thought you were just making a reference to Gorilla Monsoon, but he was an announcer.
My bad, Bob. My wrestling knowledge is so explosive.
No, I'm a fake wrestling fan. You've exposed me. I did think it was funny that the climax of these two comics is that you have a mixed tag team match. And so it's Kenny Omega and Wonder Woman versus Lex Luthor and Ultimo Monet. Kenny's great, but I'm not the biggest Kenny Omega fan. So I would have preferred it to be Willow or Tony be and a male hero rather than it be Wonder Woman and Kenny. But I get that wouldn't work with the gender dynamic because you want Wonder Woman versus Ultimo Monet and you want Kenny versus Lex.
Right.
I get that wouldn't be the gender dynamic that they wanted. While thinking about this, it surprised me. Did you notice how Superman is not in this comic at all?
He's not. That's strange.
This is coming out at the same time as that DC KO crossover. I don't think the storylines match up at all, but I did wonder if maybe they wanted Superman to be busy with whatever he was doing in DC KO. Maybe they thought Superman was too overpowered, that it didn't make sense. Obviously, the whole conceit's absurd, but with Batman and Wonder Woman teaming up with wrestlers, you can squint and see it. With Superman doing it, it's maybe a bit too absurd.
The difference in power levels is insane.
It's also funny because Superman was in a great boxing comic in the 70s with Muhammad Ali. We should look at that comic sometime. I love that comic. It's a beautiful comic.
Bob, were you surprised by the Sting drop?
You mean when Sting ambushes the Joker?
What did you think about that?
I was surprised, but then once they did it, I was, of course they'll do that because Sting has this long history and feels Batman-ish in some ways.
Right.
Also, that's exactly how they always use Sting in AEW now. If he shows up to bail Darby Allin out of something, right?
Sting is the Batman to Darby Allin's Robin.
Indeed. To Darby Allin's goth Robin, as Joker calls him. Something I did want to point out, Kenny Omega gets upgraded by the Mother Box at the climax of this issue, Matt. And the upgraded Kenny Omega costume is awful. It's terrible. But one of Kenny's nicknames is the God of Pro Wrestling. So they call him the new God of Pro Wrestling. And that was funny. I laughed a lot.
That had me laugh out loud. I will say that was a great line. The new God of professional wrestling.
Of professional wrestling. Also on the next page, you have Harley, who was previously thirsty for Sexy Citrus, Orange Cassidy, now being thirsty for Kenny and calling him a jack nerd. That was pretty funny. I was a little sad to see that the climax was Wonder Woman getting the better of Ultimo Monet. I love the CEO. I always want to see the CEO get it over on the face. So I was a little sad to see that, Matt. I got it.
Did you like the jump at the end, Bob, where everybody was, yeah, AEW, we're the best wrestle? Then everybody jumped.
Yeah. I did like, too, that they make a point that Kenny Omega wins this intergalactic title from the mixed tag match. Then he retires it.
We don't need that title.
Some might say that TK might take some inspiration for that for the current number of titles in AEW. I don't necessarily agree with that, but some might say.
We've all been telling Tony that since the beginning, Bob. People have been telling Tony a lot of stuff since the beginning, and he keeps on making the same mistakes.
I think every title in AEW works right now, with the exception of what he was doing with the unified belt was dumb. But beyond that, I even like the national title.
Oh.
I will defend every other title, but I do think the decision to confusingly unify the international and the continental title, but then not unify them, he shouldn't have done that. My other problem with TK's belt choices, and I know this is just different taste because there's a long tradition of this in wrestling, I hate that he does interim titles. If you can't defend the title, you vacate it. That's it. The next person is the champion. They're not an interim champion. I hate that.
I agree, Bob.
You defend the title every 30 or every 90 days or you lose it. None of this, you hold on to it for months while you pretend to be hurt.
You either wrestle hurt or you give up that title.
I'd prefer you just give it up because I don't want people wrestling hurt. That's not
You
good.
get that 30-day clause
Or 90.
or 90. Bob will give you 3 months to recoup.
You can get a title shot when you come back, but you don't get to come back after being out for months being, I'm the champion.
You got to come back and you got to be, hey, I'm going to stand at the top of the ramp and point at you and say, I'm next. And I'm going to look real buff because I've been working out. And you're going to give me a title shot.
That's how it works.
I'm either going to get a really great pop or they're going to be disappointed. We got to rank this.
Before we rank it, overall, on one level, obviously this is stupid and shouldn't happen. But on the other level, this was done really well and surprisingly clever. I laughed a lot while reading it.
Bob has taught me that when I review things, I need to keep in mind what the original intent was. And if the intent was to bring DC and AEW characters together and have them put on a show, this is what you get. And it's entertaining.
Does it accomplish what it's setting out to do? This does what it sets out to do about as well as you can.
I agree.
I would still have to put this below most of our superhero comics, which mostly have been great. I like most of the things we've read. And even though parts of at least 2 of the Gotham Knights runs we've read, so if listeners don't know, we have a 33 item list. And currently the top 3 things are all Fantastic Four comics from Jack Kirby and John Hickman. And the bottom 3 are all Gotham Knights runs from the early aughts. Even though there's things I like in 2 of those Gotham Knights runs, for me would maybe put this as our new number 31 above the 3 Gotham Knights runs at the bottom and below Avengers AI, which is our number 30, which in some ways is not an amazing superhero comic, but accomplishing some interesting things with virtual reality and artificial intelligence, even though it's rather dated low these 10 years later.
Looking at the list, Bob, you wouldn't want to break up the Gotham Knights. You wouldn't say that this is Grayson's run's better than...
There's a lot that's good in Grayson's Gotham Knights, but remember that awful stuff about Barbara being Jim Gordon's daughter.
That's all you got to say. There you go.
Sorry, Devin Grayson.
I need to put that in quotation marks around the comics next to the dates. Gotham Knights came out in 2000, comma, Gordon's daughter.
There's a lot to like in Devin Grayson's run.
Yeah, but there's stuff that makes it real bad.
Yeah, total unforced errors.
Yes, that's a good spot for it.
So it's our new number 31. So we've got Avengers AI at number 30 above DC versus AEW. We've got 3 Gotham Knights runs below. At some point, we're going to read some stuff that breaks up those Gotham Knights. At some point.
At some point.
All right, listeners, thanks for joining us through this excursion through a wrestling comic. Maybe we'll do a couple of other wrestling comics in the near future. I'm Bob in Cascadia. That's Matt in the Southland. Have a great night, everybody.
Thanks for listening.